Hi, Danielle here from Southeast Alaska, where we are getting a big batch of our annual 13 feet of rain. So it's been cold, it's been getting dark. I am still painting out on the trails on my morning walks, but it's been a little bit dreary, so I wanted to do something a little different than my trail vlog this week. So I decided to paint this oil painting in my studio. So that's what I'm going to share with you today, is how I painted this from a photo that I took at one of our local lakes. It had these interesting plants here. They're these tall reddish plants. So let's get into the painting. If you enjoy watching gouache painting, watercolor painting, the wild outdoors of Alaska, and different art ideas and inspiration, then consider subscribing. I'd love to have you in the community. Let's get started with this painting. So I'm just using the palette that I was using in my last oil painting. If you'd like to see that one, I'll put a card up above. I didn't want to waste the paints. I have 2 jars with odorless thinner and an array of Rosemary Company synthetic brushes. So I am just sketching with a little bit of ultramarine blue mixed with white from my photo that I have on my computer sitting next to me. And then just kind of trying to block in where I want those trees. It was a pretty rainy day that day, so there's not a lot of contrast in the photo. I was trying to get that shoreline 1/3 of the way up from the bottom, just to make it compositionally well balanced. You don't really want your main lines of contrast to be cutting your canvas right in half awkwardly. So that's what I chose to do, just trying to get that gray sky in there. What I'm doing in this painting, my strategy was to paint from the back to the front. It seems like it works really well for landscapes, because then the things that are in back are just naturally overlapped by your brush strokes that are in front. So it's a little bit easier to get sort of a realistic feel with the way that things are overlapping. Sometimes I've just gone in and put in all my darks first through the entire painting, but I think that this kind of alla prima approach, where you layer from back to front, works pretty well. I know some people like to get their sky in right away as well, just because you can key all of your other colors off of that color. And you're probably wondering why I toned this canvas with that crazy bright pink color. I just finished the last oil painting that I did of a garden pond with this bright pinkish red color, and I thought it was so fun, and that I decided to do it again for this canvas. And I was just watching a YouTube video where the person was talking about some people that will tone a canvas in multicolors using the complementary color of each area of the painting. So for the green area of the trees, you would put a reddish toned background, and then in your sky area, if it's going to be blue, or in this case my mountains are blue, you would put an orange color behind the blue. And if you had like some an orangey yellow field, you would maybe put a blue tone behind that. So that's kind of a fun idea that I might keep trying. This pinkish color was kind of a fun background for these really dark green trees. So for these trees, I'm trying to get my very darkest tones in first, and I'm using mostly ultramarine blue and yellow ochre with a little bit of alizarin crimson mixed in to really darken it up. I don't like using pre-mixed greens. I've been experimenting with using a little bit of sap green lately, but I really don't feel like it's helped at all, so I've always just mixed my own greens. I'll use cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow light, maybe lemon yellow light. I'll use yellow ochre, and you can get a huge range of greens with that. You can dull the greens down by adding a little blues or oranges or reds, and get a really wide variety of greens. And on a cloudy day like this, misty and cloudy here in southeast Alaska, the Sitka spruce trees, which is what I'm painting right now, are very, very dark and cold in color. And I believe all of those trees that I just painted are probably spruces. The really big ones, though, their limbs have gotten so big they're starting to kind of droop down. And then there are some smaller spruces and possibly some western hemlocks in the middle there, those lighter green ones, and they're a little farther in the distance too, so they're a little bit less saturated in color. So you can't really see it as well because I'm filming this in fast motion. Or I edited it in fast motion, so you wouldn't have to go through the entire 2 hours with me that it took to paint this piece. But as I'm painting those limbs, to get some variety in the shapes, so it's not so mechanical looking, I'm constantly turning my brush. So I'm turning it every single stroke. I'm turning it, so it's more flat, it's more pointy. These flat brushes offer a lot of opportunity for having different brush strokes depending on how you lay the paint down. If you put the brush flat, or you turn it sideways, you turn it on its edge. I really like how you can get a big variety of brush strokes in just by turning it and experimenting with, and also experimenting with the pressure, because if you turn the brush and then push a little bit harder, you'll get a rounder, wider shape. If you touch the edge very lightly, like I'm doing now, you'll get a sharper, more edged shape, or a thinner shape. So you can get a lot of different shapes out of just one brush that way. So those trees I'm painting there have more cadmium yellow in it. You can probably tell with that color. Putting a few hints of the trunks in there. You can't quite see it in my reference photo, but you can see some of the trunks over there. So now I'm trying to get the really warm, and I'm exaggerating this a little bit, that really warm color of all of those shrubs over there. They line the whole lake, and they get little purple flowers on them in the spring. And I am exaggerating the color. I brightened it up quite a bit there, just because I thought it would be fun to have a little bit more vivid color. And there's a little shelter there that the fly fishermen use. They will fish off of that point there. There is a creek that comes out right behind that shelter, and there's a steelhead, and the salmon will go up that creek in the fall to spawn. So there's a lot of fish that are there for the catching for people who fish. I'm not much of a fisherman, but I like sitting in those shelters to paint on rainy days. So just trying to get the water in there, trying to get the reflections to match the shapes of the trees. I think I did have to adjust a little bit. Sometimes I have a fault of being not really very careful. I just kind of jump in and I start brushing paint on, and I'm all excited about getting the paint on, and then realize I'm not putting it in the right place. And see there, I had to wipe off the wrong color, put the wrong color in the wrong place. So, I'm not a very slow or methodical painter, so I've been trying to teach myself to be a little bit more careful about placing brush strokes, placing colors. In the past, when I oil painted, I've never really had done alla prima, all-in-one-go painting before, so I could be really rash with my decisions, because especially in my first painting session, I could just throw the paint on, whatever colors, shapes, I just kind of approximate everything, and then on the second and third go around with the painting, then I would be a little more careful and a little more careful. So I had a lot of chances to to refine and make final decisions, whereas in alla prima you really need to get it right the first time. So I'm trying to learn to be more methodical, a little more careful, but right, I have to wipe some of that out again. But it's been really fun to learn this. And I apologize for the left side of the painting. It's very glary, so you can hardly see the color of those trees back there. It's really washing out that whole left side of the canvas, but those trees, that mass of trees in the background left is quite a bit greener than it looks here. So now I'm getting these plants in. I don't know what kind of plants these are. But I was really intrigued by the deep, deep reddish, purplish color. It took me a while of mixing to get a color that satisfied me, that matched. And it is hard to get it to stand out in front of those dark green trees, so I struggled with that just a little. I think I'm using a mixture of cadmium red light and some ultramarine blue. Probably some, I think I used the ultramarine blue mostly in the stems to darken them up, and mostly the reds in the little, those are kind of little dried flower buds that are those dots. I have to admit I started getting impatient with painting the dots. I had to kind of force myself to keep going because there were a lot of them. And they needed to be very varied in color, like those that I just put on there were very, very dark. They had that cluster. I tried to move from a deep purplish red using alizarin crimson and cadmium red to make a deep purplish, a little bit of ultramarine blue. And then as I layered more of those little dried buds on there, then I would add more and more and more just pure cadmium red and even a little bit of cadmium yellow to get the very brightest ones, especially there in front of the trees where I was trying to get the color to stand out. But all in all, this was pretty fun. It was fun to do those reflections, and possibly that far shore is maybe a little too saturated. I might have gotten a little too excited about those, that saturated green and that saturated orange. But it was fun in the moment. And of course it doesn't show on camera quite as well as accurately as it looks in real life. My studio doesn't have the greatest light either. That's why I have some artificial light glaring on that side of the canvas. So that's another challenge that I have. It's just very, very dark outside right now, even during the day, because it's stormy and it's rainy. And here it is, trying to reduce the glare in its final form. Well, I hope maybe you got some new ideas, or maybe nothing else, just some inspiration. I'm finding that this new subject matter, landscapes, has been really great for my creativity and has inspired me to get back to painting so much more than I was. I was doing kind of the same things for a lot of years. It's great to do some new stuff. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you're doing. Stay creative and have fun.